Welcome back to Can't Stop Snapping with our special guest, Drew Berry. We have had an awesome idea banging around in my head, especially, to be able to cover the greatest Marvel Snap cards of all time, which is why Drew Berry is the perfect guest for this episode. That's right, guys. We make tier lists all the time, every single season, and then balance changes come around. So we're cherry-picking all the S-tier cards from every season, all the most hated cards in Snap ever, and what if they had to fight each other rather than all of your other decks that you were prized? Going to have to pick your front runners. You're going to have to let us know in the comments down below who should have won what matchup. We have the flavor for the OGs. Beta Nova slugging it out. We've got some current heavy hitters like a Kitty Pryde that a lot of people might want to see nerfs. Something like Leader, OG Leader versus OG Galactus, who really is the most hated card in Snap. Find out right now. Drew, do you have a potential early front runner of something in your mind that was the most disgusting card?
Oh man, I have a little bit of a bias. You kind of hinted at it toward old Nova, because that when the big wave of beta players were jumping in, right? We're all Series 1, and everybody was running Moon Girl, Dino, and Nova and Carnage, and that was the 4 cards you had to have in your deck. And Nova was usually like the craziest part of that, but actually all of those cards were a little bit nuts.
You might see another one of those pop up on this list. Just try and slug it out. There was a whole capstone of insane beta cards, and all the play was around armor, being able to lock your opponent in. Brad, you have a favor that you might be pulling for?
Oof.
I know that you did the climb with the disgusting Galactus. He's making his appearance.
I did. That was my fastest infinite ever, was the old Galactus.
Yeah?
It was a matter of, I think, 2 hours of playing the morning from 63 to infinite in about 2 hours. So he could be the most busted, but I'm really partial to that strong guy at his old cost. So just I mean... how do you not want that back in the game to some extent? Because do you think it begs an interesting question looking at all these cards, right? Some of them
would you ever want to see them move back?
Yeah, we don't want them back. Like we mentioned Nova, we don't want that back in the game. Right. That's too good. Please don't do that. But then you look at things like Strong Guy, and you're like, would that even be that good in today's meta?
Yeah.
Especially with Hell Cow not being a 2/6 anymore, being a 4/6.
So that's an important thing for the discussion here, is that we are looking at the individual cards rather than specific combos. It gets a little bit nuanced because we have High Evolutionary in his original state on here as something that was a meta-dominant leader for pretty much an entire season since his release, so I wanted to include him, and you have to include discussion of other card combos with that card specifically, and with some of them it is inevitable, but in general we're looking at the card as an individual here. And in our first round, we got the Slobber Knocker. Open us up. We have OG Mr. Negative. He was a 4/4 in ye old beta days. He reigned supreme during an unfortunate decision by the developers to feature the peak. And he is going up against Release Zabu. 3/2, discount your 4-cost cards by 2.
Oh, all right. Drew, I don't know
Drew's
about you.
face is perfect.
Drew,
and I love that we have the 3 panel here, so we can... I'm gonna fire away to start here with Mr. Negative as my pick. We'll see if somebody disagrees or wants to play devil's advocate, and then if we have to have a tiebreaker, we'll hand it off, and then we'll be able to swing around here. I think Mr. Negative takes this one. The 4/4 being so impactful in a deck that is running Iron Man and Mystique is just elevating the ceiling of this deck so much, and Mr. Negative was disgusting. He was so oppressive that the developers had to cut him way down to be able to open up design space, because they kept releasing cards that had lower power than their energy, and then every time people were just Mr. Negative, Mr. Negative. And when he was on the top, it felt like you couldn't even run anything against him. If he had his high roll, he would stomp you, and even if he wasn't, with the 4/4 stat line, you could play a late negative and be pretty happy to just roll through people.
I completely agree, and this one almost triggers me the most because that was a time where I was just fed up with Ladder and Snap. When I would roll into negative decks, it just felt helpless. I was like, well, that's just it. They hit negative on curve. I'm done. But when I look at these two, I probably have to give my vote to Zabu, which is tough to say. For me, it's almost, I wish these two weren't matched up.
You might be thinking that for a lot of these matchups. Only one can win.
Oh, man, it's going to be tough. So, they changed negative to have 5 less power, right? They took
biggest
5 less
power nerf of any card. I should say that. It is the biggest power nerf to any card that came with no change to his cost and no change to his ability.
I know, they finally made him thematic. He became a negative powered card.
Yes.
But he also at the time, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it does have to be mentioned that Ronin, I believe, was 0 power, worked really, really well with Mr. Negative. It just had a lot going for it. And I actually don't know if this was the case, but I don't know if Magic was the way she was. So you could play her on turn 6 and have another turn of doing negative cards.
It was Mr. Negative, Magic, and Sarah when Sarah Magic was the girlfriend power duo.
Yeah, so that list was insane. That was right before global release, so a lot of people won't know how crazy that was popping off.
Yep.
It was so triggering.
Yes.
But Zabu, like, oh man, that just, it was everywhere. It was doing so many crazy discounts. It made Darkhawk Rock Slide a thing. It felt like at the time nobody really saw its true potential until this card was released. The double discount was nuts.
To plug Zabu, you got to say that it was making Crossbones not only played, but good.
There you go.
That's how crazy release Zabu was.
Insane. You never see that card. He died when Zabu was changed. But the other thing that I think about is, Zabu is still a good card, and Mr. Negative is almost seen as more of like a very niche kind of meme for fun deck, I would say. Leaning that way anyways. It can still have its moment, of course.
Yeah.
But I probably will stick with Zabu, I think. What do you think, Brad?
I got to agree with Drew. I'm going to say Zabu. I'm
Zabu
sorry,
on?
Teddy.
That's
so
hard.
this is my thinking because Mr. Negative, that type of list that you design is so built around this card where if you don't draw him, even when he's a 4/4, the list doesn't really function like you want it to. And while early lists for Zabu were leaning really heavily into the 4-drops because of the way the discount worked, you could still functionally win games thanks to just Darkhawk and Rockslide and stuff like that as being their full cost. And then, of course, how could you guys forget about the beloved 2-wombo combo of Spider-Man Absorbing Man on 5 and just being like, you can't play the game.
Or Moonroll Spider-Man into Wap Wap.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. So I think Zabu at that cost was nearly detrimental to the game and the design space if they waited any longer to change it. Whereas Negative felt bad to go against, and I can empathize with Drew in those days of Snap playing against it. But I don't think people are threatening to quit the game over it.
Man, I'm a pretty chill guy, but that had me. I was so tilted that season.
When Peak came out, people were threatening to quit. I will say that for Negative, but I can understand. Negative drops off, Zabu advances into the quarters. Round 2. You thought the first one was spicy. OG Nova, 1/2 +2 to your entire battle line versus Release Galactus. 6/2 destroys all locations if he is the only card at this location.
Now, are we doing Release Galactus? Because that's a 6/3.
6/3. Yeah.
Was Release Galactus? Are we doing
the strongest version?
The nerfed, secretly buffed Galactus?
Ooh, okay. So Tangent. The 6/2 was better, right? Because it blew
absolutely.
initiative.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Even though it would lose to Prof X, it was still better.
Yeah. You could call your shot. Good for you, dude. But 9 times out of 10,
then it's mid Galactus at 6/2.
Yeah, but he's not a mid card. Let's not confuse that.
No. midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis Galactus. He gives all the players they're going against the midlife crisis. Probably the most complained about card in all of Snap, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Only one close is OG leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then you had the people being like, you could play around leader, which I guess you also had those people for Galactus of like, he's so telegraphed, which I also agreed with at the time. But I also understand that I think the new balance is very good. But not to get caught on it.
What was that time to infinite again, Brad?
2 hours.
2 hours? How hard does OG Nova hit, Drew? Help Nova out.
My. For me, this is a no-brainer. I go Nova all day.
Yeah.
And a lot of people quite won't understand it. Like, again, like I was saying, everybody was around the same series, didn't have those same counters that you get later on in Series 3 and whatnot. But then also, even if you're like, oh, well, you just armor it. Well, this is what they were doing. They were playing Moon Girl, and then you'd have 2 Novas in hand, and you'd destroy them both on turn 6. And it was hard to read which lane they were going to end up doing that.
Yes.
And that
they would sacrifice anything to be able to get the double Nova pop.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't matter because it was +4 power. They were giving +2 power to each card that was on the board, so it was +4 total. It was insane. So Galactus, I think I totally agree with Brad. I think it was maybe the more frustrating card for a lot of the community. It didn't bother me too much. But from a power standpoint, like who reigns king here in the old days, it's definitely Nova for me out of these two.
Ooh. I think I have to land on Nova as well. I feel like just my memory of those matchups, it was entirely on the Nova on winning the game, and everybody ran him, and everybody ran the counters, but it was still all on Nova's shoulders, and he would come through. And so it was very fitting that he got cut in half, and then he got his power cut in half again, because he was just too dang much.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at this one because it'd be 2v1 anyway, but I also agree it's Nova. Galactus is very strong, but the thing is you have to build around Galactus. You're not going to do we never really saw that many decks of like surprise Galactus. You're like, why is this in the deck? Where Nova is a card where it's a problem for the game because it effectively means, like Drew said earlier, you start the game building a deck with what we would call in like other games, it's an 11 card deck now. It's a 10 card deck now because you have to have this card in there. It's not even a question. You are deliberately handicapping yourself by leaving this card out if you build without it. And that's what Nova
100%.
would represent today.
Yeah.
Through and through. +2 power, it'd be insane. And it's not even close.
All right, Nova on into the quarters. Next matchup, might have a little surprise for some people. Blinken, you would have missed his limelight time. Ronan, 5-0 +3 per card in the opposing deck. This did not last very long at all. My understanding is the developers were picking a path. They wanted to change both Ronan and Dino. Dino was in his current state, 5-3 +2, and they made Ronan the 5-0 +3, and I think they were field testing to see which one they wanted to unify around. Turns out Ronan was busted as heck to be able to have a 521 and something that you would be able to combo Ronan and then go Mystique Max together on the next turn, and you could just throw that into so many different decks. He was popping off. And he is squaring off against Silver Surfer. Release Silver Surfer 3-0 +3 to every 3-cost card on the board. Surfer's reign is hard to quantify because he was so close to Zabu, I feel like, in his meta. And they were on such tight parity with the two of them. If they had been given more time to slug it out, I'm fascinated as to who would have come out on top.
Zabu,
you think, would have ultimately won with the energy?
I think it just has more flexibility in deck construction.
Yeah.
Though, look, that
could be a battle
power
for another round then. The 3 power is insane. This is something that you could have seen on a 6-cost card, I felt like. And it's on a 3-0, which is really nice.
Which allows you to, especially with Sarah, if you would have those games where you'd go, turn 6, like even how that you set it up now, like a Brood, a Maximus and Surfer or something like that, right? Or a Juggernaut, whatever. Like you can do 3 different cards and effectively, just add up in total anywhere between 12 and 28 power instantaneously at the end of the game across the board. And we're talking about how powerful Nova was for giving +2. Also, by the way, this deck usually runs Nova with Killmonger. Imagine old Nova with old Surfer and the amount of power to go Sarah on 5 and you have Nova already out there and you go Brood, Killmonger, Surfer. That's terrifying. But I think I got to give it to Surfer on this one if I had to pick, just because of just how terrifying and what the power representation is. Where Ronan, yes, but it needs. They both need build around cards for them, but Surfer is a lot easier to quantify into a total deck space with a lot of just cards that are very good. Where Ronan, you kind of want you run a lot more baddish cards to really get the full thing. Yes, you can do Ronin, Mystique, Maximus in that sense.
Yeah.
But if you want to get use of them and make a dedicated deck around them, you got to run like Master Mold. You got to run like other cards in general to like just beef them up and then have a better plan B, which I think Surfer has a better plan B overall as a deck. So I got to leave.
What's fascinating to me is they're actually both like really good in negative. The
That's
Surfer
also
getting
true.
inverted with Wong was insane, and then the Ronin getting inverted with Mystique, also insane. So, Drew?
That's the thing too, is that this Ronin, like you said, Teddy, is in such a small window.
Yeah.
And that happened when negative was crazy. So
Yes.
it's actually kind of hard to disassociate the two in their power levels because they were just like bundled together for a very small window. I'm with Brad though. I'm gonna go Surfer. One of the craziest takes to me in all of Snap history almost is that people were saying that Surfer isn't a problem, the old Surfer, and that Brood was the problem. That was
I
just,
remember
like,
that.
blowing
Yeah,
my
people were
mind.
saying Bruce should be like a 3-1 or like a whatever.
Well, when
Yeah.
Brood landed, you were like, I lost this lane.
Yeah, it's like a great combo for sure. But like if they had not changed Surfer and changed Brood instead, wow, that would have been misguided, I think. So I really like the change that they made. I think that Surfer was hella broken. Like it was very, very strong at the time, and I'm going to give
felt
it
like for a long time
ups.
too. Like it wasn't Surfer because Surfer was the season pass before Zabu, correct? And then they
Yes.
both got nerfed on the same patch. So
Yes.
Surfer stayed around way longer than I thought he should have.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I feel like it's got to be Surfer in the sense. Like we dealt with that for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and noticeable now, Surfer is still playable even after being nerfed. Ronin's gotten really relegated to just
And he's
very
gotten
tiny
more
meta
support
share.
cards too, like with Master Mold
Yeah.
and stuff, and he's still
Yep.
not very good, and it makes me so sad. Really sad.
There might be something else that comes out along the way. We shall see. We shall see. But Surfer will move on to the quarters to determine who will face off against Surfer. We're looking at OG Leader. Embarrassingly, the runner-up for the most hated card in Snap, because this guy was hated. 6-4 copies all cards opponent played this turn on reveal. How did this exist? And why didn't people capitalize on it sooner? I have no idea. Versus OG High Evo has been the bane for he ran the table for a season here. Now, High Evo is a little bit of an asterisk because Bounce started taking games off of him before he got nerfed, which does hurt his legacy a little bit. I feel like Leader's legacy in that state is like he went out on top.
That's tough, actually, because I think everyone's gut reaction would be to go to Leader because of how frustrating it was, and it was incredibly strong, don't get me wrong. But the point you just made, and it still stuns me to this day, is that nobody had it figured out for several months.
Yeah.
And it's not like the card changed at all. It stayed the same. And even
Neither did Leech, which was his
yeah,
mate.
exactly. I was just going to say the support cards didn't even change. And all of a sudden in like November, maybe I want to say I think it was Dara who put out the deck list, and it just like popped off. And that was the
Leecher.
And then that became the
Leecher everywhere.
the meta. Yeah, Leecher. So so that was really, really strong. Yeah, what's up, Brad?
Can I make? I kind of want to make a on the fly adjustment just in case this goes in a certain direction. I just realized we may have omitted one of the best cards in all of Snap from this list, and I would like to propose that it replaces High Evo.
Ooh, you want to do we're getting a pinch hitter for High Evolutionary?
Yeah, I'm like to propose Arrow
Arrow?
before her change.
OG Arrow moves everything versus copies everything?
Does anyone have any veto to that? It's up to you guys. I was looking at the list and it just hit me because I was gonna say for Leader, I'm like, well, the argument for Leader is that people started putting him in every deck, but then I thought about Arrow, who was also being put in every single deck because she just won the game on turn 6 the same way that Leader could.
What was her best stat line? 5'8", right?
Yeah. 5'8", pull everything.
Yep, 5'8", pull everything. She got cut to a 5'7", and then buffed
She's
back.
Yeah, she's another funny one that was 5'7" originally. They buffed her because she wasn't being played. The ability didn't change at all. And
yeah,
then
it was you talking about people not figuring out leader that made a click in my head of like, oh shit, Arrow was just like that.
Yeah.
Where's Arrow?
What's the card right now? What's the card right now? Nobody's got figured out.
We'll see. There could be one out there. That's going to be a fascinating discussion as well. But we'll say leader got the pinch hitter of Arrow subbed in. I think Haiva was going to lose to leader here in this matchup. Does Arrow fare any better?
That's interesting.
It does change my it's a lot closer than, because I think Haiva was going to be pretty easy in my mind to be the one knocked away from leader, but Arrow against leader, I'm 100% not sure anymore.
Genuine, they were both universal tech for their price point. If you were missing a high end, you just ran one of these or both of these. Ramp thrived on being able to get reactivations on both of these. The marriage to Sandman was ridiculous. But leader,
what's another interesting thing to throw High Evo back in the mix is that out of all three of them, he was the most expensive, yet he completely took control of the meta. Like people had to
from the start.
Yeah, people had to cough up 6,000 tokens to get him. I know a lot of people plan for it and save for it, but like the other two, you could just grind up your collection level and get them naturally. And yet he took Storm. He took the meta by storm.
So are we doing a
We're doing a triple header? We're doing a triple header here. This is the wild card match. That's fair enough.
I don't know, man, because like
how about we all just agree on leader and move on? Because
I've got to land
that
on
was
leader.
Just crazy, right? I can settle with leader too. I can settle with that too.
I'm starting to convince myself about Arrow.
Yeah,
because they both did the same thing, like in terms of leader and Arrow, in terms of like the idea of if you're winning 2 lanes. And then you just play either one of these on the last turn, then you win, pretty much. Here's my reason I'm giving this slight edge to Arrow. Just on a last-ditch effort if I can convince either one of you. If not, it's fine. You can play around leader. You can't play around Arrow.
Well, a little bit, though, right? Because you could just try and predict where they're going to play Arrow and play into that, or...
Sure, but that means setting up your board accordingly against an Arrow. Like maybe in Conquest, right? You could do this a lot more effectively to be able to see what they're trying to do and better present your board state to be Arrow-proof early game. Whereas Leader, if you were to do that same idea, you could still at least play around in the sense of like, let's say for some reason if you're like running Wasp, right? Let's say you're playing the High Evo deck and you're running Wasp. You can order it to make sure that they copy the Wasp first. Their lane gets filled up completely, and you can sneak the Hulk in behind, right? Where with Arrow, it wouldn't matter. They'd both get pulled anyway, and you'd still lose.
Yeah, it's very close between the two of them. My edge to leader goes to how often you would see someone like play Wave, and then both sides play leader, because it was just that prevalent.
A bunch of leaders.
And you didn't see that happen with Wave. People weren't trying to rush Wave to get a reactivation later. It was like the leader spam was certainly there, and his meta share was just obscene.
Yeah,
I'm okay with either one winning. By the way, it's just like I nearly had an aneurysm when I thought about Arrow because I'm like that feels like on par with a lot of these cards in terms of like we're talking about power level.
Yeah, I think she gives a good showing, but I do think she goes down to OG leader.
And I'm perfectly okay with that. It's very close. Like in my mind, it was like 51-49 for Arrow, but I can contend with leader.
All right, other side of the bracket, OG Shuri, 4/2 doubles the power of the next card you play anywhere, which, as everybody remembers, was always behind Cosmo. Versus Beta Devil Dinosaur 3/0, same ability. A card that was easily a 3/12 stat line. And to add some context, in the beta days, Moon Girl was also a 3/3, which meant that duplicate getting multiple Devil Dinosaurs was incredibly easy. So that's part of our memory of the Devil Dinosaur, but just the fact that you could say that a card that costs 3 and with relatively low investment, or at least cards that otherwise already synergize with each other, would bring that 3 cost up to 12, 14 power. I mean, that's what OG Surfer was doing.
Oh man, this is tough. This is tough. Recency bias kind of makes me just like shudder at the thought of Shuri decks coming back and that kind of thing, which they're almost making a comeback right now, but at least it's more restricted. But But then I think about that Dino time, like that Dino era, that prehistoric era back then. That was crazy, man. Like you said with Moon Girl, like holy, they both costing 3. It was just wild. Like I just have flashbacks to those 4 cards, those Devil Dino, Moon Girl, Nova, Carnage decks. Like it was wild.
I think you got to remember, Drew, you got to put these cards in a vacuum. Don't let the Moon Girl bother you. Because, again, I think we did the same thing with Ronan. You even said it's hard to disperse them from the Mr. Negative thing. Imagine Dino as what, like, the way I'm approaching all these cards, I'm taking them out of their little time capsule and putting them into today's meta and be like, how would this fare? And Dino, I think, would be very good still. But Shuri was everywhere.
But then she needs help too a little bit, right? But there's so many cards that help her out. So I'll leave it with Shuri. That was wild. And also the last thing I'll say, I think despite being in a phase of when we had more balance changes, OTAs and whatnot, Shuri lasted for so long in her state really of being oppressive. Whereas even Dino in beta, I think he got changed within the span of a couple weeks to a month. He actually didn't have being a 3-0 didn't last too long. I don't
moved him up to
exactly.
4-0 pretty quickly, and without Zabu in the game at the time, he was still an archetype, but he was not nearly what he was before. He was not there very long. Man, Shuri is scary. Shuri, another fascinating take that it took a long time for people to catch on to Shuri. Not as long as Leader and Leech and Arrow, but a long time. And then when she hit, she just hit. And it was one of those where she was already poking her head up as like hanging with Zabu and Surfer, and then they nerfed only Zabu Surfer, and it was like, oh no. And then they went another patch and they did not nerf Shuri, and they went another patch and didn't nerf Shuri, and you were like, well, second dinner, somebody really likes Shuri, I know, but
instead they hit Red Skull like 3 times.
We're dying to 30 power Red Skull, please. Oh, we made it 1 power weaker? No.
I think that is a very interesting point, Teddy, that you say it took people a little while to catch on to Shuri. But I think that's because of the way that she dropped with like 15 other cards.
Yes.
I think that was
she
the
was
issue.
Series 5.
Yeah, on top of that,
on release. Incredibly low acquisition because people were going for Thanos and Galactus.
Yep.
Then she came down eventually to 4. But again, the token economy was just starting. People were really pinched for being able to acquire these cards. So her rise to prominence closely coincided to her getting picked up into a lot of collections.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I agree. It's Shuri. It's some of these cards, man, it's just the way that the meta warped around them so effectively is something I'm not a fan of seeing in any game whatsoever. When a deck is so good and people are like, well, its win rate isn't that good. I'm like, when you have one deck in the format where the other 9 decks behind it are all teching to beat that deck, that's a problem. But it's diverse. It's unhealthy. Please.
100%. For the record, I'm going to land on the Devil Dinosaur on this one. I think that with Negasonic in the game now, Shuri might not be as bad if she came back. Of course, the Shuri Cosmo is still so toxic, but then you also have Echo now. That could be a counter to that. And you also have Goose, which I don't know how prevalent Goose was, also pinching Shuri. So there's a lot of current Shuri control pinches. So I don't think she'd be able to run the table the way that she did before, but I totally understand. The memory of the Shuri meta was she was queen and no one was close.
She was the best autopilot deck I felt. Like when you just
100%. That's the other thing
is a little bit.
If you were playing in the bathroom in the office, you played Shuri.
Yeah, exactly.
Next matchup, we have a card that I'm not really counting the bugginess. We're saying that this is OG Kitty Pryde in her current state. 1-0, returns to hand, synergizes with Collector, all of this. So this is current Kitty Pryde. This is our first current card with no balance changes up against the most balance changed card of all time in her original state, Nakia. 3-0 +2 to every dang card in hand. Oh, the old Sarah Miracle. You think that Sarah Bounce is bad now? Imagine if all those cards were 2 power higher.
Yeah.
This was one of the original bury this card because the community had such a bad taste in their mouth, and I'm dying here because Kitty's like one of my favorite cards all time, and I think she's insane. But Nakia was also insane.
Yeah, Kitty, I think, is kind of taking or has the crown for the best one drop or for a while now, I think. But
yes.
But do you guys remember? And again, I know I'm pulling up other cards, but Hellcow was a 2/6, and you would use Nakia, giving the +2 power to all the cards in your hand on your swarms, and then you would Hellcow, and you do all these crazy things, and you just have like 5 power swarms, like 6 of them on turn 6, plus whatever else you're cooking, like your Dracula APOC. Like,
no problem.
That was insane. That was just crazy.
The OG discard was amped up because the developers felt like they were balancing cards around the discard effect being a negative.
Yeah.
And they all synergized together to get even stronger. So they had overpowered base stats and synergistic abilities. So it was just lights out if they were running it, and the Nakia fit in so well. These are both gals that if they hit the board on curve, you snapped. You could actually do that. That's the power. Like right now, Bounce throws Kitty down, they can snap, and you're like, I agree, that was a good decision. And Nakia came out turn 3, buffed everything, they snapped, you're like, well, how good is my hand?
To give a stamp on it, though, I actually think I will go Nakia. I actually will. That was a very good card. And I think Kitty is okay. I don't know. I think it's a very good card, but it falls off late game dramatically. And then you do have to invest energy in it to get it to where you want it to be. I would like to see a tweak to it in a future OTA or whatnot. But nothing too crazy. Whereas Nakia had to be basically murdered. She was put down almost. Like she was. Yeah. She went to +2 power to the 2 leftmost cards in your hand, and nobody played her afterwards.
Next to fully removing her for reworks, it was the next closest thing. They clearly nerfed her so hard they were like, we'll rework her later and bring her back up. I think the chinks in Kitty's armor are starting to show as people tech in the Invisible Woman and the Ghost, who are just like generally good cards to be able to run with control. And then Kitty's ability to phase away from initiative very thematically is starting to be hampered by people who are playing really competitively and really intelligently.
Yeah.
Brad?
Kitty's still very good, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But I'm going to refer back to my argument for Nova over Galactus. Nakia in this form being a 3/0 feels like a card to me that says you are at a disadvantage and you're handicapping yourself if you don't start your deck building with this card in mind. It's just blanket good. It feels like a card that every deck would run and should run. Where Kitty, people are starting to kind of get that kind of vibe of like, we'll just throw in a Kitty here and see how it goes kind of thing. But not even remotely close, in my opinion, to what the level of Nakia is. Any blanket just increased power is just supremely like more powerful than anything else in the game that could be done.
Yes. It's all right. Nakia on. Kitty out. Oh, my queen, no.
That might be a shock for many.
Probably a good thing if you're like a Kitty fan.
That Kitty goes out in the first round and will not have a place.
No, like in the sense that like
cards of all time. It's true.
In the sense that like we don't want her to be that strong where she's beating a card like Nakia in this sense in her current state that hasn't been altered yet. Yeah. Right? Like that would be a bad showing for where the meta's currently at right now.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Nakia on. Next up, we got the other Dora Milaje Okoye. This one, she had 2 forms in the beta that both were incredibly broken. She had a 2/0 +2 to everything in deck, and then she got changed because they felt that was too swingy into a 1/1 +1 to everything in deck, and she got played even more because it was so much easier to run a 1 cost. So, while both versions were incredibly insane, we're going to go with the 1/1 +1 to everything in deck, I think, because that's where I saw the most Nakia. And then she got increased to the 2 right now that she is with her +1 to everything in deck.
This is easy for me. This is Okoye. Sorry to cut you off, but this is we
didn't even get to what she's going
I know. I don't need the competition.
She's going
up
against Lockjaw. OG Lockjaw. The 3/2 with the full burst potential of being able to cycle as many cards as you wanted to drop, so it didn't really hurt you if you didn't get Lockjaw on curve the way that it does now. You could throw a ton of junk and then just shock your opponent with a lot of Infinite. That's what I remember. Lockjaw's been hanging around. He's been just changed minorly, so he's largely in the same state that he was before. Some even argue that his current state has advantages. It gives him the flexibility of allowing you to stick a giant card. I still think that he was slightly better in the earlier form. Part of his dominance was alongside Thanos with free stones from Quinjet. But I don't know, he still led his own archetypes for so long as like Jane Jaw forever. He's played in Mr. Negative, he's played in Thanos, he's played in High Evolutionary. His energy cheat is just crazy.
There's no doubt that Lockjaw has really good energy cheat, and I think that's been an ongoing problem for Snap, just those kind of cards always being at the top of the meta. But I think this change, in terms of looking at the scope of this change, it didn't actually hurt him that much, because now you can do sneaky things. You throw down the Wasp, and you can still play your big Hulk, your evolved Hulk at the Lockjaw location if you need it, or something like that, right? Whereas Okoye, when she was a 1/1 giving +1 to all the cards in your deck, dude, this was the card. You put this card in your deck. At least I had all my deck list. That was my 1-drop. It was just thrown in there. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was basically, did your opponent play Okoye and you didn't on turn 1? They snapped, you retreat. And that was the game. It was like that for a little bit.
Because then you knew that the Nakia was following.
Yeah. And then it's just like, well, I've been out-tempoed before we even got to turn 3. So it's over. See ya. That's why I got to give it to her. Lockjaw, super strong card. Just, that was crazy.
Man, here's the thing: is there's been so much power creep around 1 costs. I could actually see myself going like, what if Okoye just went back? She'd get played. She would get played, but would she be the best 1 cost?
You're right.
Don't know. She's up against Ham, Kitty, Sunspot, and who else punches up right now? I mean, Echo's coming out. Echo's pretty flashy.
Oh my gosh! But in a Thanos deck, and you buff all your holy, that'd be wild.
I was actually an early Thanos was trying to run current Okoye. And it was like, okay. So old Thanos with Lockjaw and Quinjet, I ran Okoye in that deck because I liked it. So like I as a 1-drop, it wouldn't even like be a question. So fair. Man, it's hard to. I love Lockjaw so much, and his longevity and across so many different metas is really a testament to how, like, I think it's a brilliant card design. I think Snap has some really clever card designs, and Lockjaw is one of them. But yeah, maybe he doesn't have quite the same highs.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I got to give it to Okoye. Again,
right.
Like, I'm tired of this being the reason for my picking them, but like, you just throw it in any deck. You have to build around Lockjaw where it's Okoye. You're like, here you go. Run with it. And like, it's funny how there's that huge difference between, like, you don't see that with Okoye currently, but it's just a matter of 1 energy. She's gone up from a 1/1 to a 2/2, same exact card, but completely shifts the dynamic of how that card works in the context of the decks that she would go in, to where she just sees virtually no play. It's very interesting how like crazy these differences between energies are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's so tight. Moving on to our final matchup, we have. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the last comment I was just going to make is it's also a testament to like the collection progress of the population, right? Because everybody was at a lesser collection position and only had access to so many cards. But anyways, let's get to this
saw
last
so
one.
much more mirrors, right? 100%. Sarah the Strong Guy, and Sarah did have an OG form that was 1 point better. This is largely a testament to, like, Sarah in her current state is not that much weaker, but she's still really good. She's had a top deck in the meta, every meta, and I don't mean it with missing some. I mean actually every meta Sarah's been a top deck. Versus OG Strong Guy, he was a 2/3 +6 power if your hand was empty, and we did allude to it. It was in a world where Hellcow was a 2/6. So some of these other discard, and Lady Sif was a 2/4. So you had some other kind of inflation around the discard enablers for Strong Guy, but still, just being able to thin your hand with the Sarah or with Zoo and then pop off with the Strong Guy was a very common occurrence.
But would you run him now?
Would I run him now as a 2/9 if I cut my hand? Yes. 100%. You'd see Dracula, Strong Guy, Zoo. I think like this, reverting him could bring a Dracula Zoo deck back into the meta.
So I did a balance prediction video, and one of the buffs I was saying was exactly this: bring Strong Guy back, because he is the least played card. Even Glenn mentioned it somewhere recently that it's one of the worst win rate, one of the least played cards in Snap currently. Bring him back. I had him as a 2/2 though, so you take him down 1 power, so he's a 2/2. You can get to a 2/8.
Okay, but even if you brought him down to a 3 cost, or just give him something.
Yeah,
he dodges. I mean, if you're doing Dracula, then I guess you would still wait until the last part of the turn, like to your Red Skull and Infinite that's discarded.
Yeah.
But outside of that context, a 2/9 is still Shang-Chiable if they have priority and they actually just empty their hand initially, whereas a 2/8 gets under Shang-Chi. I would argue that a 2/8 is sneaky buff in comparison to a 2/9 in a lot of context.
Isn't 8 and 7 are like the least common power levels in Snap, and I think it is actually capable to argue that 8 is a better stat line than 9. Nevertheless, he was at 9.
Yeah,
and he was a 2 cost,
and he was he was really really good. But I could not take him over Sarah. She just, like you said, Teddy, she's just been in so many decks for so long. Always a good card. She hasn't even changed that much. Losing that 1 power was kind of like, eh. So yeah, that's my vote.
Here's the thing: is like she's not the very top of the meta right now, and again, that 1 point is not like that big of a difference. Like if she got the 1 point back, I don't think she's the top meta card right now. If Strong Guy gets discounted by 2, I think he sees an enormous amount of play.
Yeah, I got to agree with that. I lean towards Strong Guy just because Sarah being a 5/5 wasn't the reason she's played. She's still played in her respective decks right now as a 5/4, and it just like that wasn't the make or break thing. And if anything, I think contextually around Sarah decks in general, the reason they might see somewhat lower play and kind of ebb and flow a bit coincides with the nerfs of other cards within her deck, not just her herself. Because you have to remember, her coming down from a 5/5 to a 5/4 coincided right alongside very close windows with one another, like Mysterio going from a 2/5 to a 2/4.
Yeah.
And that also hurt her stock a little bit. And I think that was more impactful than her being a 5/5. So, yeah, I gotta give it to Strong Guy here of just being like, you would see play.
Yeah, I feel like Sarah, I don't know, she kind of lands just like Lockjaw, right? Is that she's incredible, and she's been incredible for a long time, but maybe not just quite the pinnacle the way some of these other cards are. Like if you were looking at all of their 2 costs, and then you saw this Strong Guy compared to what we have now, versus, Sarah in this form versus all their 5 costs. I feel like Strong Guy does look like, yeah, that's an outlier. I want to play this.
Compared to Hitmonkey, they're almost similar power totals. Both have very difficult conditions to meet, sort of.
Fair. You have to combo a lot to be able to get the payoff, but the payoff is high.
Yeah.
That's actually a good point. I would love to see more mirror images of cards in the respect to that, like Hitmonkey's an on reveal card. Strong Guy would be a really perfect idea to have him be the ongoing version of what Hitmonkey strives to do. I think that's a very interesting
combo a lot of cheap cards, empty the hand. Hitmonkey goes off if they come all together. Strong Guy goes off if you've been discarding stuff. And with cards coming out next month, guys, Daken, Silver Samurai, Strong Guy would play in that deck. He would 100% play in that deck.
Oh, yeah.
So are we giving this to Strong Guy?
I am.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Sarah X's out. All right. Rapid fire to close us out.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we'll go... by rapid fire, I mean we're going rapid fire for quarters. Semis, we might talk a little bit more. Finals, we might talk a little bit more. Zabu Nova. I say OG Nova almost can't lose, but Zabu was so insane. I'm still going Nova.
Yeah, Nova. It's close.
Oh, Zabu bites it. Oh, wow. I was wondering how deep he was going to go, but the bracket is stacked every which way you look at it.
listeners
leader.
that don't it didn't play it at that time, they won't understand.
It won't understand.
I mean, I think they can grasp it. Just imagining Nova give
Yeah.
plus to everything, that's monstrably insane.
This one's easy for me. Surfer leader. I take leader.
That's tough for me.
Ooh,
They lived at the same time, and leader murdered him.
Yeah, because going against one another, leader copying all of the things that Surfer's doing is really good. Though the few extra turns where Surfer has more 3-drops could still, because I remember playing against that matchup, and I remember beating leader more often than not. Now I think about it,
Really?
because
Were they not running leech?
More, well, I mean,
I've got words for your opponents.
Well then, but like when they got leader off and they hadn't leashed me, I had more 3-drops than they did at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I also, depending on priority, were they getting the buff cards that got rebuffed by Surfer, or were they getting the non-buffed and then buff, and then we're on even playing field kind of thing?
That was a nuance that was hilarious, that you would get the buffed versions and then rebuff them.
Yeah, that's so stupid.
Oh, man. That was what a lot of people thought they would just, if they just took that away from leader, people were going to be okay with the card. But then they took a lot more away from him than that.
Dude, that's so tough. I can't. My heart wants to say Surfer, but man,
It is one of Snap's greatest mysteries how leader went under the radar for so long. Like that is incredible. But I will agree with leader here. It's tough, but leader.
We'll give it to leader. That's fine.
All right.
It makes my brain hurt trying to figure out which
leader
one.
to the semis. Now we're looking at other side of the bracket. Shuri, OG Shuri vs Nakia. Once again, the Shuri, the 4-2 that could buff double the power of the next card that you played anywhere, and then the 3-0 Nakia +2 to your entire hand. Fascinating. They're both buffing cards. One buffing to the board, one buffing to hand. Largely different synergies, but still same idea of developing power for later.
Nakia.
Oh.
Yeah, I understand. Like I was thinking Shuri at first, and how pulverizing that meta was, but I think being able to throw up stuff on the board that are all +2, similar to Nova, right? And the flexibility that provides, where like if you, like I don't know, like I'm also thinking about how, like in a vacuum, that Nakia would go in every deck. Shuri just still goes in Shuri decks with Red Skull and Taskmaster and stuff like that. So I'm going to go Nakia.
Oh, no, I have to decide. They would get played together, which is hilarious, as if they both existed in this way right now.
Oh, yeah, that curve is
100%
insane. Nakia, then Shuri. Well, no, because now you lose out on the chance to go Armor Cosmo Shuri,
maybe.
And you'd have to go Armor Nakia Shuri, which leaves one of your things susceptible to. But then maybe you're buffing your 1-drops along the way, or your other stuff. So like it might make you have a bit more spread across your board, where getting Shang-Chi isn't as detrimental as it was before. So you actually might have a point.
Yeah,
that's actually.
I don't want to think.
That's
about
the nerf that deck needed, was more thinking to be put into it.
Exactly. If people had to think more about it, it would not have been as good. Ooh, shots fired to all the Snap community. Sorry. Wow, because the Shuri Cosmo just felt actually unstoppable. Actually, you couldn't do anything to that. Now, again, with the Negasonic, you would have a shot. You'd have a prayer. I don't know. Nakia feeds so well right now into the dodge initiative, dump hand play style. That's crazy, and the developers have consistently tried to stop this, and like they're just with the playing whack-a-mole, but because the players still find a way to be able to run it, and it's still better than all the other ways. I think I have to land on Nakia as well. I think it's very close. But Shuri goes down. Nakia on. Next matchup, we're looking at Okoye versus Strong Guy.
Also,
Okoye.
another pair of cards that go on the same deck, but yes, also Okoye.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can dust off the Strong Guy. He had a tight.
He got out of round 1,
Sarah.
right? That's he finally broke the curse. He got out of round 1, got swept in round 2. It's fine.
Yeah,
Come back
Okoye,
next
the
year, buddy.
1/1 buff everything in deck is just amazing. Man, I'd kind of like to see her come back with Thanos.
He's the Toronto Maple Leafs. Strong
Where's the
guy.
maple weaves?
Yay! You got out around 1.
Amazing.
Ooh, the semifinals.
Swept immediately in the next round.
Ew.
Yeah. We
From the
want
left
Okoye.
half of the bracket. Left half of the bracket, OG Nova versus Leader.
Nova.
Oh.
I don't even have to think. Nova.
Nova here?
Yep.
I will go Nova as well. It was crazy.
It is crazy
think
to think
so.
about, right?
Yeah.
I think Nova kind of came in as the 1 seed, honestly, and Leader bites it. We've already said how great Leader is. There's no insult to him to go down like to the Nova, but
Well,
Nova
some
being
of
able
our
to blow
viewers
up your
might be
deck is
saying all the insult to Leader because they're probably
Yeah.
saying fuck that card.
maybe. Here's the thing: is like Leader in that meta.
With
I
the
think
Nova
you still
thing?
like Nova could come out on top.
No,
I'm trying
'cause
to
you
think.
You get the buffed cards from Nova, the +2, and then you Killmonger the Nova again and get +2 again. So that sounds awful. It's Nova.
Yeah, and it's all on the Nova being really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah, it's Nova here. Who's gonna face off with him? Is it Beta Nikia? Is it Beta Okoye? So we have 3 Beta cards.
Oh my gosh, what a matchup.
What a matchup. The 2 sisters, Nikia
Okay.
Okoye. They're not canonically sisters, are they? They're both Dora Milaje.
No, they're not canonically sisters.
3-0 +2 to every card in hand. 1-1 +1 to every card in deck. Who is the people's champion?
Okoye. She can get played earlier. And if you draw her within the first 3 turns, where Nakia would be played on 3, Okoye is still okay enough on 1, 2, and 3. Where in comparison, Nakia has a lower floor or a worse floor, I guess better ceiling. Where
Her
Okoye
window
has a higher
closes
floor.
fast, right?
Yeah.
Turn 4, turn 5, Nakia doesn't feel nearly the same, especially because 5 you were developing Sarah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say Okoye.
I'm just say Okoye too, and I'll just reiterate. When I was playing Snap at the time, it legit felt like, did they play Okoye first? If they did, they win the game. It was Snap retreat. And that's kind of, it was a little bit toxic for a little bit there in that sense.
100%. 100%. Man, I might actually land on the Nakia half of that just because of how swingy she was when she would hit. And also, Married to Moon Girl, wow, the tricks that you could pull were nuts. But we'll see. Okoye through to the finals. All right. Okoye Nova. You thought that 1 costs were powerful now? They've always been good. They've always been the best. Wow.
So I mean, yeah, this does make sense that we got to this point for the finals.
1 costs are so much more flexible. Like, as a general retrospective, the 1 costs can get fit into so many more decks. They're very flexible. They're often a better exchange of power to energy than anything else. And these 2 were so strong that they can get fit in without relying on other synergies.
So the way I'm trying to think about this between Nova and Okoye, so I'm trying to think about like the way you draw them. And Nova, to Drew's point, the objective was to try to Moon Girl them and get double Nova on turn 6, right?
Yep.
Let's say you don't do that though, and like you're going floor, and you just draw into Nova on turn 6, and you just happen to have a Killmonger in hand or a Carnage. Cool, and it works. Let's say even worst case scenario, you draw into Nova on turn 6, you have no way to destroy him. If you did that with Okoye, Nova's a 1-2, Okoye's a 1-1, so you get a bit of extra power in just that worst case scenario. Where in best case scenario, you're giving +2 to everything on board when it matters the most, and Okoye gives +1 everything in deck when you're drawing it along the way. I think I got to give it to Nova on the edge a little bit. Also with the fact that, yes, you need enablers for Nova, being Carnage and Killmonger, but looking at Killmonger especially, he's already one of the most played cards in the game and is very effective in pretty much every meta that's been in Snap, I would say, with the powerful way that 1-drops are. Though I guess there's a little bit of a downside to be mentioned in the sense that you're also potentially hitting your opponent's Novas with this Killmonger. But hey, that's kind of the way it works. But I gotta go Nova, I think.
The Killmonger is an interesting one because to get the most out of the Nova buffs, you need a lot of other cards on the board. and that pushes you more towards Zoo, which Killmonger's killing your own Zoo. Of course, you're trying to run armor as well, both to block their Nova and to protect your 1 cost, so it becomes a whole action-reaction kind of life. The ceiling for Nova is very high, and like you said, the floor a little bit higher. I feel like he could hit the floor more often, though, than the Okoye. Okoye drops early-ish in the game. The opponent's never trying to stop that with a Cosmo or, like, unable to stop it with a Cosmo. The opponent is hunting with armor for your Nova.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to lean Nova after thinking about it and hearing you guys' points. And another couple things running through my head right now is that with Okoye, if we talk about their best instance of being played right, she's a turn 1 play.
Yeah.
That's tough to pull off consistently compared to Nova just drawing it throughout the game and doing that turn 6 burst is kind of the ideal line. So there's actually value in Nova drawing it at any point in the game because that's what you want anyways for your last hand. Whereas Okoye needs to be in that opening hand first draw to be the best possible Okoye she can be. The other thing, too, is there is notoriously a lot of locations that destroy things, and Nova benefits from that, whereas Okoye doesn't necessarily benefit from too many locations, especially so because you want to play it on turn 1, and there's 2 unrevealed locations. So there's maybe Kamartage that pulls up. So they're both incredibly strong, but, man, Nova, I'm going to give it to him, my vote.
Oh, the Kamartage. Play Okoye T1, play... the
Nakia?
Scorpion turn 2 and then Nakia turn 3, and it's just what is happening?
I will never forget. I saw this Reddit post like months ago where this guy, people were basically complaining about like everything that they see in Snap, like their biggest pet peeves. And one guy said, or one person said, they said in the comments, whenever they see someone play Iceman on 1 and Scorpion on 2, they audibly say out loud, "Oh, get a life." And that every time I see that now, I think of that every time, and it makes me chuckle.
Oh, get a life.
Just like,
Iceman.
it's such a funny insult to me.
Yep. I say as I'm spending so much time on this mobile game, you have to get a life. You have to get a life. Man, I probably line onto the Nova as well. We've also seen like he got hit really hard. His power spikes were just nutty. It's kind of been a standing element in Snap that 50 points is what you're looking at to be a competitive deck. And the Nova power burst was so high that it was 50 points was not cutting it. And then with how many cards are able to make extra use of it, you're looking at other destruction synergies that have now been fleshed out significantly from what they were, or even if you're just looking at Iron Man and what he could do if he's getting a lot of buffs to his location, it's terrifying. And if again, if Okoye was in her current state in the current metagame, I think that she's on the bubble. If Nova is in his current state in the current metagame, he's in. It's Nova Killmonger and then 10 cards. So yeah, I think we're going to crown our king.
It's Nova.
Make sure in post you give Nova the little conquest crown.
Yes.
And in honor of Nova winning the conquest crown, what is y'all's favorite variant of Nova?
Not the ultimate. I know Brad's answer.
Oh, I hate that fucking one.
I rock the one where he's got the planet behind him and he's standing.
Yes, that's the one that I have as well.
That's a cool one.
Anything that's a starscape in Snap is always stylized.
Yeah, we knew it would happen. Drew, your camera goes out. That's okay.
My bad. But yeah, that's the Nova that I love. I have quite a few Novas, though. They're all pretty good. I agree with you, Teddy. Anything with stars in the background usually looks amazing.
Oh, all of them, yeah. And I never want to split them because they always look worse with the foiling and like even the inked stuff like doesn't look good with like the stars. I want to see the color.
Yep.
Yes,
totally
100%. 100%. So there's our showdown, our bracket. If you guys have clever ideas of some other different kind of discussions like this that you'd be interested in hearing us battle it out, let us know down in the comments. I think it was super fun to be able to do this rather than just saying more meta talk or berating other current Snap news. I feel like there's a lot of other channels that follow through on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, I had a great time. This is a great idea. Loved it.
Walk down memory lane for sure.
Yes.
Hey, Teddy, we had a guest. Who was our guest, Teddy? What happened?
The fantastic, the indelible Drew Berry showed up to break everything down with us. Lost his webcam at the end, though.
He did lose his webcam. He is now a black void, but we can still hear him. He's still in our hearts, and he's still here with us in general. He has not died. Hey, Drew, where can people find you? Where can they kind of get to know who you are and enjoy your amazing content?
Hey guys, I feel like I have to echo like I'm in like a deep void and help, please. You guys can catch me. I'm just on the YouTubes. That's the place where I like to be with streams, videos, all that fun stuff, custom cards, talking about new cards. It's a good time. And the other places would be the Discord. We got the Berryverse. Super proud of that. We got a community of over 1,200 people, I think now, and just really awesome engagement. Everyone's just talking about cards, data mines, and making custom cards, giving feedback on custom cards is one of my favorite things about Marvel Snap, honestly, is engaging with the community. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Drew. Thank you, Teddy, for being my wonderful co-host. And of course,
always.
We'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Bye.